and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the roll.
Vaughn.
Here.
Sullivan.
Here.
Schauer.
Here.
Kenny.
Here.
Gustafson.
Here.
Clistic.
Here.
Belzak.
Here.
7 present.
We have a quorum. That brings us to questions, comments, and announcements of a general nature. We put this on our agenda several years ago. This gives any resident or member of the audience an opportunity to address the council on any issue that could be on the agenda or is not on the agenda. So is there anybody in the audience who would like to address the council at this time? If not, we move to the approval of minutes. I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the September 19th, 2022 City Council meeting. Moved by Alderman Kenny, seconded by Alderman Vaughn. Questions or comments regarding those minutes? And as we discussed earlier, there was some change that the clerk brought out. If none, the roll.
Kenny.
Aye.
Vaughn.
Aye.
Belzak.
Aye.
Clistic.
Aye.
Gustafson.
Aye.
Sullivan.
Aye.
Schauer.
Aye.
7 ayes.
Minutes have been approved. It takes us to receiving of communications. Do any of the aldermen have communications they'd like to share? Alderman Gustafson.
Yeah, I've been having communications with the cities of East Lampeter, Pennsylvania, and Summers, Wisconsin. Both of these cities have ordinance charging excessive police calls relating to retail theft. Well, East Lampeter has charges $250 per call over 10 calls in a month. Summers, Wisconsin charges $500 per call over 20 calls in a month. So I'm obtaining detailed information from each of these cities that I will have for our goal-setting meeting.
Anything else, Eric?
That's it.
Alderman Klista?
Thank you, Mayor. I received communication from Mr. Jerry Legansky, 8,000 block of Farmingdale. I just followed up with him if he had the same observations, not seeing enough police in the area. And he said the same thing as well. I mentioned earlier in our pre-meeting, I spoke to one of my neighbors who's a North Riverside police officer with regards to retail theft. And one of the things he mentions that it takes an officer off the street to do the paperwork for a retail misdemeanor, 3 to 4 hours. Chief Thomas corrected me that for us it's only 45 minutes, but whatever time police officers off the street, residents don't see them, they don't feel secure from time to time. So I only brought this up because residents have reached out for me not seeing them as often, and I see a spike in retail theft. So I think Alderman Gustafson's onto something. I would support any ordinance that he has on that item.
Any other communications? Alderwoman Sullivan.
Thank you. I did receive some emails from resident Kelly Glisson regarding the Safety Act. He did email myself, and Chief Thomas just shared something that the Village of Orland Park is doing regarding dealing with the Safety Act. And Chief Thomas was very responsive, shared some insight, and provided follow-up to resident Glisson. I think we all received an email from resident Vic Patton regarding his concerns with the approving of a new vaping retail in the city of Darien. He also attended the public hearing about, I think he spoke at the municipal services meeting. I was not present at that, but he did share concerns regarding public health safety and the danger of vaping, and just was asking that the city not approve this establishment. But it was clarified at municipal services and in the council meeting that it is a permitted use business for that area. But he did express concern. Thank you.
Somebody's phones. Okay. All right. Anyone else? Alderman Kenny?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a communication, I think Alderman Vaughn and yourself, from Lynette Whitehead regarding some bullying of her daughter at Eisenhower Junior High. Police department's has been notified. Alderperson Sullivan, Mr. Patton was not at the municipal services meeting on that night. Okay. He was not in attendance. And as a piggyback to Alderman Clistic's comment regarding residents not seeing police when I first got on the council, I did some ride-alongs, and God rest his soul, Stan Nemec came up to me and said the same exact thing. And he said the police officers are never past my house, and I go, that's not true. He goes, how can you say that? I go, because I know for a fact that there was a police car that went past your house 3 times in an 8-hour shift on Friday night. And he goes, and how do you know that? I go, because I was in the squad car when he did it. So residents sometimes don't think that the police officers are there because they're probably not looking for it. But the police are through our neighborhoods more than we think they are. And I've experienced that.
I
That's-
agree.
And that's all I got.
I agree, except they're showing me video now, so everyone has cameras. So not only do we catch the bad guys, but we also catch when we don't see the police down the street. So it works both ways. I agree 100%.
Well, just get my good side then, okay?
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, can I just correct? I'm sorry, I misspoke. I just looked back at the email, and it was planning and zoning that the
Got it.
resident attended, not municipal services. Sorry about that.
Anyone else? Any other communications? All right, takes us to the mayor's report. We have 2 items on the mayor's report. We have several guests tonight. We're going to have a presentation on our annual financial report for the year ended April 30th, 2022. And then we're also going to have our police pension actuarial report. Michael, I'll let you do the introductions.
Thank you, Mayor. First, in terms of our annual financial report, this evening we've got Kellen O'Malley, who's the auditor who handles the audit from the accounting firm Sikich. They've been doing our auditing our books for quite some time now, and I think they've been doing a great job. Also have to compliment Julie, our staff, who I think really does a great job working with them also, but I'll leave it open to Kellen, and I know these are financial matters, so try and stay alert.
Kellen, you may want to raise that microphone a little bit.
Mike, I'm sorry, before you start, can I just add, you mentioned they've been our auditors for a long time, but we have gone out for proposals. They just keep getting awarded the contract. It wasn't
Right.
like a long-term relationship
Correct, no,
with auditors.
and
so
we've been
just to
extremely
clarify.
happy with their
Yeah.
service so far, but
Yeah.
we'll see. It's time to go out again this year.
Well, thank you for having me here tonight. My name's Kellen O'Malley. I'm the I'm a senior manager here at Sikich and the audit manager on the City of Darien audit. Jim Savio is the partner on the job. He has a conflict tonight, so it'll just be me. I'm going to start by focusing on the annual financial report. Starting with looking at the table of contents. The financial report is split up into 2 sections, the introductory section and the financial section. We do not issue an opinion on the introductory section or the supplemental data at the end of the financial section. Within the financial section, we have the independent auditor's report, which I'll cover in more detail in a few minutes. That's on pages 1 through 4. That's followed by the management's discussion analysis, and then followed by the basic financial statements. The basic financial statements include the government-wide financial statements, the fund financial statements, the proprietary fund financial statements, the fiduciary fund financial statements, and the notes to the financial statements. The government-wide financial statements are the consolidated financial statements of the city. This includes all funds except for the city's police pension fund. The government-wide financial statements are split up into 2 sections, governmental activities and business type activities. Government-wide financial statements have a long-term focus, and which means that they include items such as long-term assets, capital assets, and long-term debt. These are the most similar items or financial statements to your corporate financial statements that you may be used to looking at. Below the government-wide financial statements, we have the fund financial statements. Fund financial statements have a short-term focus. They do not have any capital assets or long-term debt reported within these. Their focus is on current spendable resources, and they're most similar to how you budget your financials, how the city budgets. Fund financial statements are split up into major and non-major funds. The city's major funds for the year were the general fund, the motor fuel tax fund, and the capital improvements fund. And on pages 9 and pages 11 are reconciliations between the fund financial statements and the government-wide financial statements. Below the fund financial statements are the proprietary fund financial statements. This includes a balance sheet, income statement, and statement of cash flows for the water fund. Proprietary funds have the same long-term focus. They're just a little bit more detailed and include a statement of cash flows. On the following page of the table of contents is the fiduciary fund financial statements. This includes the city's police pension fund, a balance sheet, and an income statement for the police pension fund. Below that is the notes of the financial statements on pages 18 through 55. This includes additional info that supports the city's basic financial statements, and it's meant to be read in conjunction with the financial statements. Below that is the required supplementary information. I won't go through everything in this section, but this includes additional information on the city's pension plans and and a couple other budget versus actual schedules. Below that is the combining and individual fund financial statements on pages 67 through 79. These are more detailed schedules with budget versus actual information for governmental and proprietary funds. And then finally, on the last page of the table of contents is supplemental data. As I stated before, our opinion does not cover the supplemental data, but this information includes additional info on the city's long-term debt requirements. I'll turn now to page 1 of our audit report, which is our independent auditor's report. The independent auditor's report looks a little bit different this year. There's new accounting standards issue, which changed some of the content and wording within the report. One of the major changes that our opinion moved to the front. Like I said, the content and wording is very similar. Format just looks a little bit different. In the second paragraph is our opinion. We've issued an unmodified opinion on the city's financial statements. That's the highest level of assurance that we can issue as auditors. So congratulations to the city, Julie and Mike, for their hard work. Below that is the responsibilities and management for the financial statements. This paragraph basically states that management is ultimately responsible for the preparation of the financial statements. Not much else in there. On page 2 is the auditor's responsibilities for the audit of the financial statements. Within this section, it communicates that our objective is to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements as a whole are free from material misstatement. The key here is that it's reasonable assurance and not absolute assurance. Therefore, it does not guarantee that a material misstatement may be detected during our audit. It goes on to say that the risk of not detecting a material misstatement resulting from fraud is much harder to detect than a misstatement resulting from error. Misstatements resulting from fraud may include collusion, misrepresentations, and as I said, are much harder to detect. The last paragraph within that section is that misstatements are considered material if they would influence the judgment made by a reasonable user based on the financial statements. Therefore, materiality includes quantitative as well as qualitative considerations. On the third page of the audit report is other matters. The first section within that is the required supplementary information. The required supplementary information includes management's discussion and analysis and other additional required supplementary information. This is a responsibility of management. We've applied certain limited procedures to this information, but we do not express an opinion or provide any assurance on that information. Below that is the supplementary information, which includes the combining and individual fund financial statements. This is also the responsibility of management. This information is derived from the basic financial statements and is subject to certain auditing procedures. So our opinion notes that these are fairly stated in relation to the basic financial statements as a whole. On the fourth page is our other information included in the report. The other information includes the introductory section and the supplemental data. Our opinions do not cover the other information, and we do not express or an opinion or any form of assurance on them. Our responsibility is to read that other information and consider whether a material inconsistency exists. The very last section in the independent auditor's report is the other reporting required by government auditing standards. This information is required as the city spent over $750,000 in federal funds this year. They were required to have a single audit. That section makes reference to our single audit report and our government opinion or yellow book opinion, which are in separate reports. After the independent auditor's report is the management discussion and analysis. This information is prepared by management. The MD&A provides good analysis of the financial statements and provides comparative data and financial highlighted related to the financial statements. If you're going to read one thing in the audit report, we recommend you read the management's discussion and analysis, as it provides a good additional info. I'm going to jump now to the governmental balance sheet on page 8 of the financial statements. The balance sheet is split into 4 columns. It lists the city's major funds, the general fund, the motor fuel tax fund, and the capital improvements fund. All other funds are summarized in non-major funds in the 3rd column. Looking at the general fund in the fund balance section, the unassigned fund balance for the general fund as of April 30th, 2022 was $8,248,000. This equates to about 65% of current year expenditures, or a 7 or 8 month reserve. The motor fuel tax and non-major fund balances are restricted for specific purposes on the balance sheet, and the capital improvements fund is assigned for capital improvements. On page 10 is the income statement or the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance of the governmental funds. The first section here is revenues, followed by expenditures, resulting in any excess or deficiency in revenues over expenditures. The city had an excess of revenues over expenditures of about $5.8 million as of April 30th, 2022. This is comparable to the prior year amount of about $5.5 million. The general fund transferred out about $3.9 million to the capital improvements fund, resulting in a net change in fund balance of $2 million, increasing the fund balance from about $6.4 million to $8.4 million as of April 30th, 2022. I'm going to jump now to to page 14 on the statement of revenues and expenses and changes in net position for the proprietary funds. Looking at this schedule, the water fund had an operating income of over $1 million this year. This means that revenues were sufficient to cover current year expenditures, including depreciation. This is just a slight decrease from last year's operating income of about $1.3 million. Below that is any non-operating revenues and expenses, resulting in a total change in net position of about $1 million, increasing the net position to about $10.169 million for the water fund. I'm going to jump now further back into the report to page 58 to cover some of the required supplementary information. Looking at page 58 is the schedule of employer contributions for the city's IMRF fund. This information is presented over the last 7 fiscal years and is presented on a fiscal year end April 30th. The first line is the actuarial determined contribution. Below that is what the city actually contributed to the plan during the year, followed by any contribution deficiency or excess. So as you can see, over the last 7 years, there was no deficiency or excess. It was exactly what the actuarially determined contribution was. The contributions as a percentage of covered payroll were about 12.14% compared to 12.93% in the prior year. On the following page is the schedule of employer contributions for the police pension fund. This is presented over the last 8 fiscal years and on a fiscal year end, April 30th. Once again, the first line is the actuarial determined contribution. Below that is what the city actually contributed to the police pension plan, resulting in any contribution deficiency or excess. As you can see, that the city had an excess contributions over the last 8 years. The contributions as a percentage of covered payroll were about 61.65% compared to 55.32% in the prior year. On pages 60 and 61 are the schedule of changes in employer net pension liability and related ratios for the IMRF fund. This information is presented on a calendar year, as IMRF's valuation is performed on a calendar year. So the measurement date is December 31st. The first section is the total pension liability calculated by the actuary. Below that is the plan fiduciary net position. These are the accumulated contributions and assets in the plan to fund the net pension liability. The difference is that is the net pension asset as of the calendar year ended December 31st, 2021. So the city's plan was 112% funded. One thing to note there is, like I said, that this is as of December 31st, 2021. So depending what the markets end up next year, you may expect that asset to decrease. On pages 62 and 63 is a schedule of changes in employers' net pension liability and related ratios for the police pension fund. This information is presented over the last 8 fiscal years and is on a fiscal year end. The top is the total pension liability calculated by the actuary. Below that is the plan fiduciary net position. These are the assets accumulated to fund the total pension liability, resulting in a total net pension liability of $25,727,000 at year end. The plan is about 56% funded as of April 30th, 2022. I'm going to move now to the auditor's communications report. Within this report is a cover letter on page 1. That's followed by required communication with those charged with governance on pages 2 to 4. This communication is required in accordance with auditing standards. It provides routine communication. This year, there's really nothing new in here, and it communicates that we have not had any delays in the audit or any disagreements with management. We're required to communicate any adjusting journal entries that were found during our audit. There were 2 adjusting journal entries, and those can be found on page 5 of the report. We're also required to communicate if there were any past adjusting journal entries. Past adjusting journal entries would be entries that are deemed immaterial to post, but above a certain level, we need to communicate those to the council. We did not have any past adjusting journal entries during the year. Our communications of deficiencies starts on page 7. We also issued a 1-page management letter stating that there were not any material weaknesses identified during our audit this year. The communication of deficiencies also notes that we had no significant deficiencies. We did identify one new deficiency that's listed on page 8. And if you flip to the appendix at the back of the report, Appendix A, it lists any prior year comments and the status of those comments from the April 30th, 2021 audit. We had 3 prior year comments listed. 2 were considered implemented, and 1 is still considered applicable. Finally, we also issued our single audit report and our consolidated year-end financial report. With that, I'll open it up to questions, and thanks again for having me here tonight.
Yeah, one quick question on page 24, compensated absence. Employees are able to carry over sick time till they retire. Is that normal? I've never seen that like in the private sector. Normally, you got to use your sick time per year, and that's it. here you mentioned compensated absence. So this is a cost that we keep. So then an employee keeps sick time until they retire. Is that normally just in like a general sense with other cities, or how does that? Page 20, top of page 24. So usually, like every place I've been at, you got to use your sick day or it's gone, right? So or vacation you can carry over. But here, you're saying that you keep the sick time until you retire that you don't use, and that's a obligation we have.
Yep. Yeah.
Is that
so-
normal for government? Normal for city? I don't know. I'm just
Yeah, that's
asking.
normal. That's normal for cities. You know, cities will pass their policy, and within those policies,
Okay.
List out any accumulated sick time that they can accrue, and typically the city will determine what could potentially be paid out, and that's what's being accrued on the.
Okay.
And there's limits either in our union contracts or personnel rules of a cap at some point, maybe 120 days. I don't remember all the days, but it's not unlimited.
It's
okay.
120 hours, not days, I think, isn't it?
The sick leave is by days.
Oh, that's by day, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But it's
That's just
dependent
funny.
on the contract, and all the communities I've been into, that's standard procedure.
And it's
It is pretty
typically-
standard.
And it's typically paid out at 50% of the rate.
Oh, okay. I just
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be used toward health care and retirement also, so there are different tax,
Okay.
I don't want to call it tax gimmicks, but tax advantages to handling it certain ways.
Gosh, I've seen carryover vacation. I just never seen sick day, so it must be just a different thing.
In terms of the private sector, yeah, government
There's-
accounting is way different.
Oh man.
Eric?
Question for you. On Appendix A, page 12, when we talk about the segregation of duties issue, and we talk about the compensating control here with the city council's review. When you're defining city council, is that including the treasurer in that? Because I would think that would be a strong compensating control as a review by the treasurer.
Yes, we are including that. What we're really alluding to there is that it's not a significant deficiency. It's a
Right.
it's a deficiency and recommendation for improvement. Where possible to delegate the review and approval of the journal entries.
But you're factoring in the treasurer's part of the city council? I mean, is that, Brian, or should we spell out in the future, spell out city council including the treasurer? Because I think that's important that, the treasurer does his review, and that's a very strong compensating control beyond just the alderman.
Yeah, well, what I really look to, I review the financial
Right.
statements, as you know, every month.
Right,
I detail
absolutely.
review them, and then we provide them once a month to you in your
Correct.
packet. And I think what we're saying there, though, is after Julie's prepared them, I've reviewed them.
That's
made
correct.
any corrections, then it comes to the overall council for Joe here to ask any questions. if he has.
But you're reviewing it, and I think that
Yeah.
needs to be indicated, that's a compensating control, is your
I
review,
have no
along
problem
with the
that.
city
I
council.
don't know what the auditors are.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can include in
Okay.
the communication.
Yeah, because I think that's important.
Anyone else?
I'd just like to make an overall comment, though. Again, been very happy with Sikich. I think they've done a great job. They anticipate things instead of waiting just for the audit. I know we're already working on things for next year, so they're very anticipatory in their service. They're always very responsive. We haven't gotten extraordinary bills from them. If Julie has questions, Kellen and Jim both, I know they're very responsive to us. So thank you guys for your work and service. There's a lot of information in here. I see a lot of eyes glazing over, and it's understandable, even for me. I did not work in government accounting, even though I was a practicing CPA for many years, and it took me a couple years to really sort of get comfortable with these financial statements. So if there is anything he presented, or you're sort of reluctant to ask in public or whatever, feel free anytime. Just as you're looking at it, just feel free to contact me if you want to do it privately or whatever, or go over certain things that he might not have mentioned. Yeah, Eric?
Yeah, is there anything under the future county pronouncements, things that you feel the city really needs to get their hands around that could be, have potential magnitude?
GASB 87, which is a new standard related to leases, is coming out. That's something that we've discussed with Mike and Julie. That's going to change how leases are accounted for on the income statement and the balance sheet, moving those as to more of a balance sheet item. rather than just being reported on the income statement. So that'll be a major change, and that's going to be effective next year.
That's more of a presentation type of issue?
Presentation, yeah.
Right. So there really isn't anything there specific that may impact the financial stability of the city then?
No.
Okay.
Mary?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to echo Treasurer Corrin's comments about the audit and also call out Julie, city staff person who's instrumental in coordinating this, and thank Mike and other city staffers, Treasurer Corrin and other city staffers for their collaboration on this. We had an opportunity at last month's admin finance meeting to meet with the auditors and have them present in preparation for tonight, and it's always very informative and appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you
Dylan.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're going to go from one exciting topic to another. Our police pension actuarial report.
Actually, this one's probably even more important. I'd like to introduce Jason Franken from Foster & Foster. He's not engaged by the city. He's engaged by the Police Pension Fund
Right.
to prepare the report as far as what our obligations are under the Police Pension Fund. As Sikich was indicating in terms of the financial statements, the one big consequential item in the financial statements is our obligation to police pensions. And you could, I don't know if you were able to see it as he was calling attention to it, as flipping through it, but Jason actually calculates those numbers. Those numbers have already been rolled into the financial statements that we just reviewed. So he does his numbers as of April 30th. So those have already been reflected in the April 30th financial statements. But now I'll turn it over to Jason so he can explain how he got these obligations for us.
Welcome, Jason.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me this evening. I'm going to start on page 5 of the report. There's 50 pages here probably. I'm not going to go through a lot of the pages, but I do want to make sure I hit all of the highlights. So first off, there have been a couple of fairly significant changes since last year. One is that, well, at least as of now, I guess because this is the May 1st to 2021 actuarial valuation, but as of now, we have the transition period for the consolidation of the police pension fund has passed. In theory, all of the assets are supposed to be in the fund due to some outstanding litigation. We're still in the process. The fund is still in the process of consolidating all of the police funds into one large investment pool. The fire funds in the state they've actually completed their transition, so they have consolidated all of their assets. So it is going to change the structure of this plan a little bit. Your local board is still needed to administer the plan. So that if there's disability hearings, all of those things, the actuarial evaluations, all of those things are still being handled by the local fund. The only thing that's changed, and it's a significant change, is that now all of the investment decisions have been transferred from the local board to that state board. That's made up of, there's nine people that make up that pension investment fund boards. So that is a fairly significant change that will hopefully increase the long-term returns for the plan, as well as lower the investment expenses that are incurred in the operation and in the investing of the funds. So that's one. As part of that, the consolidated funds did perform what's called an experience study to review all of the assumptions that the DOI had previously created. So they collect data from all of the police funds from across the state. They review the experience, and then they release actuarial tables, including retirement tables, termination tables, disability tables, and then they adopt a mortality table that is that was released by the Society of Actuaries. So they did a study. They released the results, and we've adopted many of those assumptions as part of our valuation here. So in total, it'll actually these new assumptions lowered our liability a little bit, but it actually increased our contribution requirement by a little bit. So the total liability went down, but some of the new assumptions reduced the amount of backloading that was inherent in the contribution calculation. So the liability went down, but our contribution did go up a little bit as a result. The other significant thing that happened this year is, if you're paying attention to the markets at all, the returns for this year were the returns for the year that ended on May 1st. Were actually pretty lousy, and that's obviously continued since then. During 2022, I think you had a fairly strong return through December 31st, but the last 4 months of the year, you went south, and the total return for the year was about negative 8.25%. So, far cry from our 7% assumption that we are using. The good news is that last year we had a 25% return. So a lot of, it really offset those, many of the gains that we had last year. When you have that gain, you like to build on it. Unfortunately, we gave most of those back this year, but I guess that's the way the market works. I guess back to the assumptions for a minute. One thing that I failed to mention is that we did not make a change to the investment return assumption. We continued to use a 7% assumption. The consolidated fund just last month, the second week of the second Friday of September, they actually adopted what they consider to be their investment return assumption, and it was 6.8%. So it is a little bit less than what we have been using. We can discuss whether or not it makes sense to make a change. We did this report several months ago when they had not adopted a rate yet. So that's something we'll consider next year. What's the most appropriate assumption to use from an investment perspective. But on page 5, you'll see that the contribution requirement did go up from 2.1 to about $2.4 million. Some of that has to do with the return that I mentioned. We do smooth investment gains and losses over a 5-year period, so we didn't take the full hit this year, just like we didn't get the full benefit last year when we had a 25% return. So those, like I said, will largely offset each other, and next year's contribution will really depend on what happens with the market this year. So like I said, there was that increase. There was a couple other things that led to it. One, there was a disability. There was a fairly young person that became, is now receiving a disability retiree that led to an actuarial loss, and that also contributed to the increase this year. If you flip to page 8 of the report, you'll see that we have 3 columns here. Last year's numbers are on the right. This year's numbers are in the left column, and the middle column shows where we were before the assumption change. And you'll see last year, if you look at the second from bottom row of numbers, you'll see that we were $22.7 million of unfunded liability and a 59.2% funded ratio. Our funded ratio went down by about 0.6% just based on the experience. And then the liability actually goes down. Our funded ratio goes up by 0.3% to 58.9% as a result of that assumption change. So you'll see that as a result of those changes that I talked about, the total liability did go down by about $260,000. On page 10, this shows the development of the contribution. In the bottom of section E, you'll see that it was 2.1 last year. It was 2.3 million this year as a result of the experience, and then it goes up to 2.4 based on the assumption change. Like I said, the reason this is going the change in the contribution is going the opposite way is because we've eliminated a little bit of the backloading that from relative to last year. So by reducing the backloading, it takes a slightly higher contribution today, and that's why we're seeing an increase there when the liability was actually going down a little bit. All right. If we flip all the way to page 26, this shows the smoothing, the investment smoothing. In the middle of the page, you'll see that there are gains and losses relative to our 7% assumption. So last year, if you look at the 2021 row, we had a gain of 5.3 million. We're recognizing that gain 20% of the time. This year, unfortunately, we had that almost a $5.5 million loss. So, like I said earlier, basically gave back that entire gain. We recognized 20% of it, and we still have about $4.4 million of unrecognized loss there. And in total, when you look at the last 4 years, we have just under $2 million of unrecognized losses from the investment side that will flow into our equation here in the next 4 years. Obviously, this changes every year depending on how the market performs. To the extent that we have another bad year, then that's we could end up seeing some compounding, and your contribution requirement could go up by more next year than it did this year. Hopefully, we'll see the market turn around a little bit, and at least get back to some decent return for next year to try to keep that that contribution from increasing too much. So those are the highlights of the report, but I'm happy to address any questions that you have, or if there's you had a chance to look at the report in advance. If you have any specific questions, I'll be happy to answer those as well. Yes, Mike.
Yeah, I have two questions, Jason. Number one, I neglected to mention before, I did get confirmation today that the transfer of the assets has been accomplished to the Downstate Pension Fund as of September 1st, and they received approximately $32 million, so that has been moved, so that part of the deal is done. Two questions. I know I'm asking you to be a little prophetic here, Jason, but number one, you indicated that the actuarial calculations that you've been doing for probably 6 or 7 years for the pension fund at this point will continue to be done at the local level. Is it possible that changes and the state hires an actuary to do it individually?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the Department of Insurance historically has provided reports to all of the funds. So the DOI has had an actuary. They do reports, and they provide them to each fund. Unfortunately, those reports are based on all of the methodology that's outlined in the Illinois Pension Code. And the methodology that's outlined in the Illinois Pension Code is extremely backloaded, even more so than, it has a 90% funded target by 2040, and it's the level percentage of payroll, so that there's the pension ramp. And when you have a 90% target, you end up with a contribution. I've described it in the past as, you're paying the minimum on your credit card bill. It's not covering the interest on your unfunded liability, so you're just digging yourself a deeper and deeper hole. So they provide, the Department of Insurance has provided those reports in the past. The Consolidated Fund will continue to provide those reports, but those calculations are going to be exactly the same as what the Department of Insurance has provided. So it's not based on the funding policy that the city has adopted. And so that report doesn't necessarily provide you with the number that you're looking for, because you're funding on a more reasonable basis. You have that 100% target. You're trying to pay down the entire unfunded liability. So you're paying more than what the statute requires, just because it's good, makes much better fiscal sense. So that, for one, you wouldn't have that contribution number. Two, they also do not provide the GASB information. The GASB information, those are the calculations that go into the financial report that you just heard about. So you need to have those calculations as well. And so the Consolidated Fund will provide that report, which essentially gives you the statutory minimum amount that needs to be paid. So that's what their report is going to provide you with. It's like, okay, this is the minimum that we have to pay. Anything above that is good. What we've provided historically is that better number, the more fiscally responsible number, and you can continue to have that report done if you'd like. So just full disclosure, we have actually been hired by the consolidated fund, so we are providing that statutory calculation for them. We're starting to. We haven't prepared any at this point, but we're in the process of completing those now that they adopted their investment return assumption. So it's kind of a long-winded answer, but it's kind of a complicated.
My second question is, I mean, over the last several years, we've made some assumption changes. Some have been less consequential than others, but they all change the contribution requirement from year to year. Is there any anticipation that the state would uniformly come out and say, these are the assumptions that everybody, I would seem to make sense that everybody should use the same assumptions, so that Darien's not using one, Downers Grove another, but have you heard anything in that regard?
Well, so in their valuations, they are using the same assumptions for everybody now. I mean, there used to be some differences in the investment return assumption because the smaller funds couldn't, were restricted in what they could invest in. They could only put 10% in equities. So having a 6 3/4% assumption, didn't make a lot of sense. So there used to be some differences in the assumptions. But now that all of the assets are all in one invested, the same way, now we're going to have all the police funds are going to be using the same assumptions in their valuations. When you're funding the plan, though, that doesn't necessarily make sense, just because one community may have might be completely different than the other. The one assumption that comes to mind is the salary increases, for example. The average from across the state might not necessarily reflect what your particular community is. Historically here we've seen that the assumption, your experience has been very similar to their assumption, so we feel comfortable using that. But there are definitely some exceptions where we have to adopt separate assumptions just because of the increases. In some cases, there's like long-term incentives or whatever, where they get bumps, later in their career that can have significant impact on the actuarial valuation. So in those cases where those exist, they need to be reflected. So the consolidated fund will use one set of assumptions, but if you're doing an independent valuation, you would want to make sure that all the assumptions are make sense for your plan, even if they are a little bit different than what the Department of Insurance the consolidated fund now is recommending.
Jason, there's a lot of talk as president of DuPage Mayors and Managers, I could tell you that part of our legislative agenda is to get the state to amortize pension fund through 2050, like other pension funds. Michael is not real crazy about that. There's even some talk about something called a rolling amortization. Could you explain that a little bit? Because there's some talk about moving to that.
Yeah, so there's several different ways to pay off your unfunded liability, just like there's several more types of mortgages. And the argument is often made that extending that amortization period from 2040 to say 2050 is just like refinancing your house. And so everybody does it, so it seems like a reasonable approach. And in theory that's true, but the big difference is that the way the Illinois Pension Code works, if you're refinancing your house, let's just say you have $1 million house, you pay that down and you're down to $900,000, then you re-amortize it. You've made progress, you've paid it down, now you're re-amortizing it. That's the approach that most homeowners take when they're refinancing. They've made progress on their mortgage, and they're going to benefit from lower interest rates or whatever. They're going to extend that amortization. With pension funds, specifically the way they've been funded in Illinois, the problem with that analogy is that, that backloading that's in the funding, that's in the Illinois Pension Code. They might start with $1 million of unfunded liability, and over the last 15 years, it's increased from 1 million to 1.1 million. Now we're going to re-amortize that, extend our amortization period, and you always end up in a situation where you're losing ground. So that's the one big difference. I've heard this argument several times, but it's not really an apples to apples comparison, just based on the way that the plans are funded based on the Illinois Pension Code. To your question about the rolling amortization, that's where, currently we're at a 19-year amortization. It goes to 18, 17, 16, 15, marches down by 1 year. It's called a closed amortization. You get 1 year closer to zero each year. Well, a rolling amortization is also known as an open amortization, where maybe it's a 15-year amortization, and it's always 15 years. So whatever happens today, you're going to fund that over 15 years. Whatever happens, 10 years from now, that's going to be funded over 15 years. And so that does better align the contributions with the benefit payments that are going to be made from the plan, because currently we're targeting 2040, but the benefit payments aren't going to stop in 2040. They're going to be paid out forever. So why are we funding to 2040? We should better align the contributions with the benefit payments. Where you have to be careful, though, is setting that amortization period. It basically has to be, you can't be more than 15 years. If you're unless you change it from a level percentage of pay to a level dollar. And the reason I say that is because if you have that pension ramp sort of built in, and you have a 20-year rolling amortization, that payment could be perpetually negative. There could be perpetual negative amortization, meaning that your contribution doesn't cover your interest, and since that period isn't getting shorter, it's always going to be like that, and you end up with a unfunded liability that just grows forever. So when you're making that change, you have to be careful. You can't say, well, I want this to be 20 years. You have to consider all of the other factors that go into the amortization payment. And you can't just say, well, it needs to be 20 years, because you might put yourself in a position where your unfunded liability is just going to grow forever. If nothing else changed, then, like I said, 15 years would be the maximum that I would want for that open or rolling amortization period to be. If you changed it to be a level dollar, where you take that backloading out of the calculation, well, then maybe 20 or even 25 years might work. But you need to consider all of the factors and how all of those factors impact that unfunded liability, and whether it's going to go up or down in the future before you make any sort of change like that.
So by 2040, we're supposed to be funded at 100%, correct?
That's the state law says you got to be 90% funded, but you are currently funding to 100% by that date.
Okay. So right now, we went from 59.2% in the end of 21 down to 58.9, correct? Of unfunded?
Yeah, yep. The funded ratio went from 59.2 to 58.9, yes.
And before they changed the assumption about 4 or 5 years ago, we were in the 60s, weren't we? Michael?
Maybe around 60, 61.
Okay. So the point is that, and I'm just making a statement in general, okay? Because as long as there are police, I'm going to fight tooth and nail to make sure we always have police in this town. With that said, when I started on the city council, I think we were contributing probably $990,000 for the police pension. Next year we're going to 2.4. We're probably going to go to 2.7 after that, and yet our funding ratio is going down. That's my concern on this whole thing. It is not a question to you, it's a rhetorical question. At what point do we figure out how we're going to make sure we get the pension funded for not only for the city of Darien, but for every, city in the state of Illinois? So.
Yeah, and just, we have taken, or not we, the collective we, I guess, there have been steps taken to to make it easier, in the future. One, the consolidation, the goal is to increase your investment earnings to lower the city's obligation. That's one. Two is that in 2011, there was the implementation of Tier 2 benefits, meaning that anyone hired after 2010 gets a different benefit level than the people that were hired before that point. The biggest difference is the COLA. The COLA is a lot less. It's a simple COLA rather than a compound COLA. So those benefits that are being earned by Tier 2 people are much less than the Tier 1 people. So that will help control the new liability that arises as you transition from the Tier 1 active population who's earning benefits to the Tier 2. At this point, you're roughly 50-50 is your split. So those future accruals will be less than what they would have otherwise been. Granted, as part of the consolidation bill, there was an enhancement to those Tier 2 benefits. They're still significantly less than Tier 1, but they are greater than what they were at the adoption of Tier 2 back in 2011. So they have taken steps to help in the future. What's difficult is all the unfunded liability is attributable to benefits that have already been earned, and with the pension protection clause in the Constitution, Illinois Constitution, there hasn't been any way sort of forward to lower the benefits for anybody that's already in the system. Whether it's benefits that have been already earned or benefits that will be earned by them in the future. So that the pension protection clause has said, from whatever the benefits this person has on day one, that's what they're entitled to for their entire career. So that's there is not a easy to identify way forward to lower your pension liability that's been accrued, but they have taken steps, sort of prospectively to try to contain how much new liability arises and is earned by the active population.
Any other questions for Jason? Jason, thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Going back to our agenda, takes us to our city clerk's report. Joanne?
No report this evening, thank you.
City administrator report. Brian?
No report, Mayor. Thanks.
The department head information questions. Chief Thomas or Mr. Combat?
I have nothing. No report, Mr. Mayor.
Just a reminder, Chief Thomas and I, along with Mr. Kenny, Alderman Kenny, will be attending a seminar tomorrow. It's a breakfast at the Marriott in Naperville, and I think it's 1801 Napier Boulevard. And we will be hearing State's Attorney Berlin, Chief Mendrick, as well as there's a judge, as well as Greg Hart. We'll be talking about the Safety Act. We'll be gaining additional information. And as I said, I think at the last council meeting, that we're in the process of doing our due diligence on the law. Last week, I talked to Brad Cole, the executive director of IML, and Brad indicated to me, as he did to other mayors that night, that there are working groups at the state level that are working to make recommendations on changes to the law, but none of those changes will take place until after January 1st. They're going to actually wait for the implementation of the law, and when that takes place, they're going to start seeing where there are issues with the law. And again, as Chief Thomas mentioned, you hear contradictory information. I was told last week by Mr. Cole that if somebody appears on my property and they're, quote, threatening, I could have the police remove them. Chief Thomas said that he has found nothing in the law which indicates that we have the ability to do that. So there's also a certain amount of misinformation being put out there in terms of who's going to be released as of January 1st. Our whole objective is to make sure we get all the information we can get and to do everything we can so that our policing efforts in Darien keep our citizens safe. That's the major goal. I had a reporter ask me, not a reporter, I had several residents who called me to ask me whether or not my goal is their safety, and I said, my goal is always your safety. And I said, we are going to follow the law, and we are going to work to make sure that we encourage changes to the law, and the DuPage mayors and managers will be supporting changes in the legislation which we feel makes the law a better law and get rid of some of the issues. And I think we could all agree there's some good things in the law, but there's a lot of negatives in the law that are very troubling. So we're going to be working toward that. But again, and I don't think Chief Thomas will disagree with me, our major concern is keeping the residents of the city of Darien safe. Right, Chief?
Absolutely.
Okay. Dan, nothing?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. All right, that takes us then to the Treasury report. Mike?
Haven't had enough numbers yet tonight, guys.
Make it easy, Mike.
Requesting council's approval of warrant number 222311 in the amount of $824,233.50 from the listed funds. Payroll for the period ended September 22nd in the amount of $294,069.59 for a total to be approved of $1,118,303.09.
Motion to approve. Alderwoman Sullivan, seconded by Alderman Belzak. Any questions or comments for the treasurer? If none, the roll.
Sullivan,
Aye.
Belzak,
Aye.
Gustafson,
Aye.
Clistic,
Aye.
Vaughn,
Aye.
Shower,
Aye.
Kenny,
Aye.
7 ayes.
The warrant's been approved. Standing committee reports. Do any of the aldermen have reports to give? Mary?
We had an administrative finance committee meeting tonight, and our next one is scheduled for November 7th, Monday. I will not be in attendance that evening for city council. The Economic Development Committee meeting has been canceled for this week, Thursday, October 6th. The next one is scheduled for Thursday, November 3rd.
Thank you. Alderman Belzak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next Municipal Services Committee meeting will be on October 24th at 6 p.m. in council chambers.
Thank you. Alderman Kenny?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next police committee meeting will be held on Monday, October 17th at 6:30 p.m., our new time, across the street in the police training room, pending agenda items.
Okay, that takes us to questions and comments, agenda related. Yes, sir. Or do you want to wait until it comes up on the agenda?
Wait till it comes up, that's fine.
Okay. Takes us to old business, there being none. Takes us to our consent agenda, and I'm going to remind the viewing audience, let the viewing audience know that item A on our consent agenda has been added to our new business. I'll read these items. Item B, consideration of motion to approve the resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a bill of sale for the transfer of certain water main and appurtenances to the county of DuPage. Item C, consideration of a motion to approve a resolution waiving the competitive quote process and accepting a proposal from Baxter Woodman Natural Resources for the purchase and installation of 3 educational informational signs for the native prairie plantings adjacent to the 74th Street and Elm Native Planting Project at a cost not to exceed $11,700. Item D, consideration of a motion to approve a resolution accepting a proposal from Illinois Landscape Supply for the purchase and delivery of Unilock Pisa retaining wall block and coping for the municipal complex 1710 Plainfield Road retaining wall project in an amount not to exceed $7,540.80. Next item is consideration of a motion to approve a resolution accepting a proposal from Terrain Landscaping Contractors for the preparation and installation of a retaining wall at the municipal complex 1710 Plainfield Road in an amount not to exceed $10,395. Next item is consideration of a motion to approve a resolution accepting a proposal from Illinois Landscape Supply for purchase and delivery of Uniblock Pisa retaining wall block and coping for the Ellsworth and Stewart Overland Flow Drainage Project in an amount not to exceed $11,186.60. And the last item under new business is consideration of a motion to approve a resolution accepting a proposal from J.C. Landscaping and Tree Services for the preparation and installation of a retaining wall for the Ellsworth and Stewart overland flow drainage project in an amount not to exceed $24,300. Motion to approve. Alderman Belzak, seconded by Alderman Shower. And the roll.
Belzak,
Aye.
Shower,
Aye.
Vaughn, Clistic,
Aye.
Kenny,
Aye.
Sullivan,
Aye.
Gustafson,
Aye.
7 ayes.
The consent agenda has been approved. Takes us to new business. Consideration of a motion to approve authorizing city staff to construct an aggregate shoulder within certain areas on the 8300, 8400 block of Kearney Road in an amount of $8,300 contingent on 100% reimbursement from the property owner. Motion to approve. Alderman Belzak, seconded by Alderman Shower, and discussion. Alderman Gustafson?
Yeah, during the municipal services meeting, I did bring up the concept of doing a 50-50 split with the owner. And the reasons behind that are, first of all, there is no admission charge to get into this facility. If you haven't been there, you really need to go. I mean, my wife and I were both really impressed with the facility. When we were there were 10 families. 8 of the 10 families were from the city of Darien. So it's definitely being utilized by Darien residents. All of their animals, except for 2, are rescued animals. So they're doing the best that they can. And it's just a great facility. And, you know, and when you're checking out, and they have the various, and we bought quite a bit of produce stuff. And, you know, they have a little jar when you check out and stuff there to collect money for food for the animals. And I just think, you know, since this thing it's on a city road, it's being utilized by Darien residents, why not give a little bit back to this place who's really trying to do a great job? I mean, if you have kids, this is the place to take kids. I mean, it's a beautiful facility. So it was just a concept I was throwing out there that, hey, let's try to give something back to a facility that's being so heavily utilized by Darien residents.
I have no argument against the existence of Honeybee Farm. I think what she's done for the property is exemplary. It really is. I've lived there long enough to tell you that that property, prior to that, there was nothing there but a home
Right.
and some ill-kept property. When the original owner moved out, the property really looked kind of shoddy. So I commend her on what she's done. And while there are residents who still have concerns about the smell of the animals and some of the noise and some of the other things that come with that, I think most people agree that it's a very nice place to take children on a Saturday. That said, there was no parking issue on Kearney Road before that farm was built. The city of Darien, you feel, has an obligation because it's the city's road, but the city of Darien did not ask her to build Honeybee Farms on that property. And the existence of Honeybee Farms has created a parking issue. Now, I'm glad that you attend there, but you don't live next to it, and you're not somebody who has to go in and out of there
I understand.
like 63 homes in the subdivision. I think to her credit, she understands that, and I think she has made the offer to pick up that total cost, and I really don't feel that it's appropriate for the city to pay half of that. Mary?
Thank you. I too have been there. The Honeybee Farm does not reside in Darien. It resides in unincorporated DuPage County. It obviously is on a city road, and as Joe referenced, Brookeridge Creek subdivision, which is in my ward, is adjacent. There are people that, you know, wishes the farm weren't there, but clearly in previous council meetings, Joe has mentioned his communication with the county and various other people that the farm is here to stay. The owner, Cindy, has made amazing improvements. It is a beautiful property. She continues to do things to beautify it. They just recently had a big farm to table meal, and they incorporate children in the community. They really hit it out of the ballpark during COVID when kids were learning from home, getting them to have hands-on experiences. But I think her willingness to pay and the fact that her business is not a City of Darien business, and she's not asking for a split, that I feel like we should, we've spent time and money. Dan Gombeck has gone above and beyond to make this happen by talking to neighboring owners and businesses. It's going to be a really good deal because we're using city staff to do it. So I do feel like we are contributing to this project in kind in many ways versus just the dollars.
Anything else? If not, the roll.
Belzak,
Aye.
Shower,
Aye.
Clistic,
Aye.
Gustafson,
No.
Kenny,
Aye.
Sullivan,
Aye.
Vaughn.
Aye.
6 ayes and 1 no.
Item passes. Item B, this is also attached, this is for the signage, I believe, isn't it, Dan?
That is correct, yes.
Consideration of a
Parking ordinance.
motion to approve an ordinance amending Section 9-3-2, prohibited parking of Chapter 3, parking restrictions, Title 9, traffic regulations of the Darien City Code. Motion to approve. Alderman Belzak, seconded by Alderwoman Sullivan. Any questions or comments? If none, the roll.
Belzak,
Aye.
Sullivan,
Aye.
Vaughn,
Aye.
Kenny,
Aye.
Gustafson,
Aye.
Clistic,
Aye.
Shower.
Aye.
7 ayes.
That takes us to our third item, which is the former item A under the consent agenda. Consideration of a motion to approve an ordinance granting a special use for a drive-through establishment, PZC 2022-05, to Breeze Canlodi of 1005 75th Street. That is the old West Suburban Bank location. Motion to approve. Alderman Belzak, second by Alderman Vaughn. And now discussion. And as noted, we had a previous discussion of the work session. And if you have additional questions, you can ask those now. Anyone?
I guess I just, if you can, for the viewing audience, explain, because we have received a communication, and I have not necessarily printed, but verbally heard from other residents expressing their concern about the, having another vape shop, smoke shop, and special use versus permitted use. I think if we could take just a second to explain that, to our residents via television, that it would help people understand.
I would like Jordan to answer that. Jordan?
Sure. So just to sort of reiterate what was in the packet and for everyone at home. So this is a special use for the drive-through operation. It is not for the primary use itself, which is a tobacco retail store and food store, which allows for the sale of, let's say, Coca-Cola bottles, chips, packaged items. So really, again, this use is permitted by right in terms of what they're selling. What you're reviewing tonight is a special use for the drive-through.
No, I know people will question, why do we permit this? And as with the Sterling Bay property and other properties, when something's a permitted use, you almost have an obligation to approve that. I mean, there really is no discussion of that. It is a permitted use. Tonight, I think we need to separate the drive-through, which is what we're really voting on tonight, from the permitted use. I also understand, as Alderwoman Sullivan said, a lot of people have an issue with a vaping products store and a tobacco store within the city of Darien. There was one that opened up in Brookhaven Shopping Center, which had some glaring lights to it, and it really aroused a lot of anger on the part of a number of people who contacted me, contacted Mary, and as well as some other people. But I'll add to that, and this is not a support of this concept. I've paid attention driving through other communities, and there are a lot of vaping and tobacco stores in other communities. This is going to be called Mr. Smoke. I saw one the other day that said
Dr.
or
Smoke.
Dr. Smoke. I saw one the other day that said Smokehouse. You know, I've seen them in almost every community. Naperville has them, Westmont has them, Woodridge has them. Now, if somewhere down the line we want to say we're going to limit this to 2 within the city of Darien, we could talk about that. But it's not we did not go out looking for Tabriz to come in and say, Tabriz, we'd like you to build a smoke shop there. This was something, as a businessman, he decided he wanted to do. He has 2 previous locations. We've done our due diligence on those 2 locations. There's been no issues with those 2 other locations, according to Jordan, with what we found doing our due diligence. So, I mean, it's a situation where we have an individual who wants to open up a business within our city, and some people aren't going to like it, but the city has to acknowledge the fact that it's his right to open up a business at that location. So that's enough said on my part. Anyone else? Mary?
So just to follow up on that, so because it is a permitted use, and like you said, nothing can stop that. On tonight's agenda is the special use regarded strictly to the drive-through at the facility. The next course of action would be if the city chose to pursue limiting future businesses of this type and, you know, potentially other types of businesses to come. That would have to be done in the form of an ordinance.
That would be a whole revision to the zoning ordinance. It would be a public hearing, public notice, things like that. I don't know, it would be that process, and ultimately, they'll come back to the city council for an ordinance.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
I think that's something we should definitely discuss at our next goal setting.
I
for
agree.
sure.
I think it's on the agenda for the next goal
Perfect.
setting.
And to clarify, that would be similar to what we do with alcohol, where we would have a limited number of licenses. Could we do something similar where a facility sold more than 51% of their business was tobacco? We could make it similar to what we do with alcohol, where we have licenses as to who can sell alcohol and who can't sell alcohol, or limit the number.
It's not exactly apples to apples, because we get new businesses that come in, they want a liquor license, and the council may grant that. Whereas a tobacco store, once you don't want one anymore, there's no reason to even, it would come before the city council. But there are some differences, but it would be basically not having any tobacco in a permitted use. As we have we don't have tattoo parlors. So if you wanted to open a tattoo parlor in Darien, you couldn't, because it's not permitted anywhere. So there are some uses that we just do not permit by zoning.
Well, I got a question for you. What are you going to be placing in those windows?
The windows are, I'm Mark Daniel. Good evening again. Daniel Law Office in Oak Brook Terrace, Illinois. I represent Tabriz Canlodi. In the windows, you have floor-to-ceiling on the north elevation and a lobby on the west elevation. You've got to keep everything away from the windows to avoid it becoming a sign. And we can't have lit signs, we can't have the flashing signs on the inside. In all likelihood, you're going to have some visibility to a display cabinet, but you don't have displays in those windows.
So you're not going to have flashing neon lights or anything like that?
No. No, that's in the code. That's one of the conditions I think that we agreed to. Condition number 2.
I think that was through the Planning and Zoning Committee and Municipal Services.
And it was finessed at Municipal Services to add a few things, and we clarified no blinking digital or electronic message window signs.
Great.
Could I add one other thing on this? Mr. Canlodi is also going to be the owner of the property. So in addition to having the regulatory licenses elsewhere, he doesn't want to have a problem locally anywhere. He's also an investor in Darien. He's not a tenant here. He's purchasing the property.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. To your point, I actually got spoken to a few planning and zoning people that they weren't a big fan of it either. But as you mentioned, it is a permitted use. I'm not a big fan of it either. As Alderman Schauer mentioned, the optics aren't the greatest of coming in from the east side of town and seeing that. But it is a permitted use, and my logic is if they're going to be here already, might as well at least make them successful, right? That's sort of the thought behind my logic there. I know Mr. Jordan helped out with some of the parking. I just did a quick drive-through up up there seemed everything seemed to check out. So. If they're going to be here anyways, nothing you're going to do, might as well support them. I guess the only question I would have for the attorney is if our police was there many times a month, would the owner, what's his thoughts of reimbursing the police? As the mayor said, you want to keep residents safe. So if they're visiting you 4 or 5 times for a pack of smokes that's stolen, a vape kit that's stolen, maybe a soda that's stolen, like what are your thoughts if they visit too much that we charge you back for some of that?
I think that's a very broad policy issue. I wish I'd lent it some thought ahead of time. We have everything in cases and in
Okay.
storage, and it requires handling, and we are a regulated business. We expect not to have that situation. I believe the one situation that Tabriz mentioned would have actually been an armed robbery if they came in with cash under threat of using a weapon. So it wouldn't be in that retail
Yeah.
theft category, not prosecuted locally. I assume that you guys have local shoplifting violations that you prosecute administratively.
Yes, and it just takes up a lot of time, right? I have people telling me, well, you don't see the police, and all I can say is, here's all the thefts that we're seeing, so, that's got to take care of it, right? And the businesses pay taxes. I have no issue with it, but if certain businesses overuse the police versus everyone else, right? So that's why we're looking at those ordinances.
No, I understand. I think the revenues from this certainly should offset. I don't want to necessarily sell it on revenues alone, but there is a factor for the special use and the impact of the drive-through here. And
Yeah, okay.
if you're talking about multiple 6 figures, it's not just 2 or 3 theoretically. So it is a substantial revenue benefit. Not to say that that's necessary to offset a police, dedication of police. The police will understand the facility going in, and certainly if Chief Thomas has suggestions about avoiding retail theft, we'll listen to it.
Okay.
On the fine side, I think that is a policy issue for you guys, and obviously the business has to live with what you decide.
I mean, is that an issue with your other stores, the retail theft?
Not at all. Not once in 12 years have we had to call the police.
I think the one that happened in Villa Park was a report by somebody else, wasn't it?
It was
So-
actually the ADT
Okay.
alarm system that triggered.
Yeah,
So stuff's behind counters and that kind of stuff.
that's correct.
Any other questions? If none, the roll.
Belzak,
Aye.
Vaughn. Shower,
Aye.
Sullivan,
Nay.
Clistic,
Aye.
Gustafson,
Aye.
Kenny.
Aye.
6 ayes and 1 nay.
Tabriz, while we would have hoped you would have opened up a restaurant there instead, we will welcome you to the Darien business community. As with all of our businesses, we wish nothing but success for you. Your success is our sales tax success. So best wishes to you. I know this has been a very complicated issue for us to go through. As you can see, there's a lot of emotion behind this, a lot of concern over having a second one of these. Actually, this is a third store, because we have a liquor store which is also sells tobacco products at Brookhaven as well. But we're going to wish you well and much success.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all.
Then it takes us to any comments or anything that anybody on the council has anything they'd like to share. Eric?
Yeah, and the announcements, I just want to remind people that Election Day is November 8th, and that Centercast School District 66 is having a referendum, and they're looking to significantly increase property taxes. So my taxes would go up about $600. So you can easily calculate what the increase would be for your home. So make sure you do that. Should be no surprises when you go in to vote.
Anything else? Mary?
Just so that the audience is aware, yes, there is another school, there's multiple school districts in Darien, District 61, District 63, and District 66. Cass School District 63, which is not the same as Center Cass 66, is also having a referendum. And, like Eric said, please, on anything on the ballot, whether it's a candidate, a referendum, or a cause, educate yourself. The Cass 63 referendum is very different than the one at 66. So I just want to make sure you know what school district you reside in and educate yourself about what the money being asked for is going to.
Get out and vote.
Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not this weekend, but the following weekend, the weekend of October 14 and 15, the Darien Lions Club will, after a 2-year hiatus, be out on the streets collecting money on Candy Day. And I'm hoping everyone contributes what they've been saving over the last 2 years.
Just to add to that, 60% of the money that's collected goes to the Lions of Illinois Foundation for many charitable activities, Camp Lions, blind. I have attended that on numerous occasions. Children who are 1 week are children who have hearing deficiencies, another week children who are blind, and a lot of that money goes to that. But 40% of that money stays here in Darien. And this last year in June, Darien Lions Club gave back $35,000 to Darien organizations, food pantries, the churches, the Historical Society. So when you put money in that can on Friday or Saturday, the 14th or 15th, you're really helping Darien because that money's going to go back into your community. And I'm speaking as the chairperson for that committee this year. So I really need people to understand that this is a good thing. And I realize people don't like solicitors. They don't like people on the corner. These Lions will be wearing yellow vests with a Lions logo on it. Please be careful when you see them because they're taking chances with their lives too, being out there on the street. But I thank Tom for bringing that up because I forgot about it, and yet it's been something about my mind for the last month or so. Mary?
I know they're usually also stationed outside some of the retail stores, but my question is, I know the last 2 years when they were unable to because of COVID, you were able to make donations online. I'm hoping they're still going to have that, where you could just make a donation on their website.
In fact,
or there was like a QR code too.
Yeah, there'll be on Facebook. There'll be a QR code. You can write that QR code, and you can make a donation. Businesses in Darien contribute. We will have people outside of Our Lady of Peace on that weekend for all the masses. Our Lady of Mount Carmel for all the masses. So we'll have a lot of in front of Jewel Food Store, in front of Dunkin' Donuts. So we'll have a lot of that going on that weekend. We actually have very few people going out on the street. Street collections are something which I think are dying. So we're really looking for those personal donations. But again, thank you. Anything else? Motion to adjourn? Alderman Shower, second by Alderman Vaughn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.